in making this film a fiction film, I gave myself creative liberty to explore things that were maybe true, but they weren't actually memories, you know? So something can be true, but also not a memory.
It is my great privilege today to be speaking with Sophy Romvari, the writer, director, and producer of Blue Heron. Sophie, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Of course, very happy to be here.
Honestly, this is such a special film. I don't need to tell you, and though I will say congratulations on your TFCA award
Thank you.
recently for the Toronto Critics Association, amongst many others. Um,
Thank
that was this is such a beautiful piece. It's well deserved. Where did it come from?
Thank you so much. Where does it come from? It's a very straightforward answer. It's just a very autobiographical film. So the story itself comes from my own life experience and my family's experience, but it is a fictional script. And so, of course, there's a blend of fiction, memory, autobiography, but it is inspired by, very much my lived experience. So there's not so much an inspiration as there is a desire to depict something that felt very personal, but also I knew would also be quite universal.
That's a great way to describe this film, is that it does feel very personal and yet it's accessible.
Yeah.
This beautiful piece of tension between past and the present. And I was wondering if you could talk about that, because a lot of times we sit in one space with a film. We hear the story of the thing that happened or dealing with the thing that happened, but we're allowed to sort of be brought into this world together, and why you wanted to tell the story in this way.
Yeah, it's a great question because I agree there's a perspective is I think the most interesting entryway into a film. So I knew that I wanted to tell the film from the point of view of my own perspective, which is of a sibling's perspective of another sibling who creates a certain dynamic in a family that I was very I had never really seen that in a film before, and I knew that it was my specific experience, so I wanted to try to depict that. But it was a challenge on the script level because I wanted to make a film that was essentially making a character the protagonist who wasn't really the main character of the film. So it was a challenging thing to do, to why root it in that character's point of view. And I think the best way to do that was to show not only the impact it has on this character as a child, but then also the impact it has into her adulthood and that experience that I think many people have had. Well, everyone has really, essentially, when you get into adulthood and you start to look back at your life and try to understand what happened, what made you into the person you are. And so, as much as the film is about grief, it's also about trying to understand what are the elements that created you as a person, and what do you take from your childhood, what do you take from your past, what do you need to leave behind, and trying to explore those things like cinematically, I think. Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that makes the film so special, is you have a protagonist who's watching things happen.
Mhm.
And it's these eyes of innocence that don't fully understand what's going on, but is left to deal with the effects of what's going on around her.
Mhm.
And one of the things the film talks about that tension between memory and truth.
Mhm.
Um, for you, as you're beginning to bring this story together, I know it's a fictional story, but also very autobiographical. What did you learn about memory
Mhm.
as you're bringing the film to life?
I think that's a really good way to put it, the line between memory and truth,
Mm.
because I think about that a lot when like what draws me toward film and different genres of film is that tension actually is what are you trying to represent and what are you trying to say that is true and authentic versus what is fictional and created. And I think that in making this film a fiction film, I gave myself creative liberty to explore things that were maybe true, but they weren't actually memories, you know. So something can be true, but also not a memory. I think I realized because there's things that I depict in the film that didn't happen exactly how they happened in the film, but they're still true in a sense because they're still capturing something emotionally that I feel like is honest, even if it's not exactly how something happened. Because you're kind of trying to express something, and it's not always helpful or interesting, actually, even to depict something exactly how it happened. And that's my job is to make it interesting and to make it compelling. So I think I learned a lot about how to use the fictional format to tell a version of the truth, if that makes sense.
It does, and actually, I'm glad you said that because, and I don't know if I've ever asked this question before, but TV has a lot to do with this film, and but it's not, it's very rarely shown.
Mhm.
Which, by the way, kudos to the shout out to His Girl Friday, which I adore. I heard, Cary Grant, Hildy, Hildy. I'm like, I know what's going on. Um, but why was that something you wanted to add in? Was that it? Is this idea of filtering our stories through other stories? Is that sort of led to this? Because it is an interesting device.
I think I'm very naturally drawn toward depicting other media within my films, like media, screens, digital. I like to root things in what I've grown up around, and also what I think we all are now, for better or for worse, surrounded by, which is screens. And everything is mediated through screens. And I think a big part of the atmosphere of growing up in the 90s was also the prevalence of screens becoming more prevalent, and the presence of a computer becoming part of the household around that time, the Windows 95, which wasn't really part of like a suburban house before that time. And so the way that those things shape us as well, and how we see things. And I think also I have spent a lot of my short films up until now having characters look at the past through media, through photographs, through videos. And so I think it's just a preoccupation where it's a way to kind of juxtapose the past and the present in a very immediate way. Someone looking at the past through media. So it just happens very naturally, I think. Yeah.
It's such an interesting way. Like, I mean, like I said, it's one of these things that filters the film, but it doesn't direct it. It's such a fascinating way to interact with the world that you've created.
Mhm.
Um, but I also wanted to ask you about mental health. And it's interesting because you have this film that takes, as it is it 20 years? I think it's a 20-year jump,
Yeah. Yeah.
roughly, give or
Yeah.
take. And you hear the conversations about it so differently than you do in the 90s, if you will, at this
Mhm.
point.
Mhm.
And I wondered in your mind, as you're working through this and developing this world, what is that conversation like in your mind? Is there frustration of we didn't get it then? Is there a sense of innocence about that too, as you're trying to understand it in a time when we really didn't?
I think honestly it was important for me to show that there was a real lack of understanding and support, but then also that that continues to be the case now.
Mm.
And I think that was a big part of why I wanted to show the past and the present as well, is that I don't think that we've come to a place where there's easy solutions to situations like what my family went through. There's expansions within the field of mental health and with social services, but I think that we're still in a position where there's a lot of gaps. And that's why I cast real social workers to play essentially themselves, because I wanted their expert opinion to be part of the film rather than just me putting words in their mouth. And I think that it's important to recognize that many people experience this without having support or an outlet or even understanding of how common it is. I think that's been my the most jarring experience of sharing this film is just meeting person upon person who has experienced something very similar, but they felt very alone in that experience. And from every age range, people who are just coming into their early adolescence now, who maybe felt that they were more in the shoes of Jeremy, or I've met people who are in their 70s, 80s who experienced a sibling back when they were children that reminds them of Jeremy, or also parents who have lost children. So it really has been a jarring and emotional, and also I think for everyone somewhat cathartic experience to share those things, but it doesn't make me feel, it's sad. It just ultimately is really sad, and I don't think we have a great response or answer to these questions. I wanted the film to be really confrontational about that, but it doesn't wrap up in a bow.
Absolutely. And with that being said, that was where I wanted to go with this. Is there anything significant that you took away from it? The idea of wrestling with our mental health now as we look back on the past and say, try and understand things that we didn't then.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the film is as much about not understanding mental health as it is about just not society not really having room for or space for people who are not, conventional in their approach to life. And I think that's one of the unfortunate things about the way that we have set up society is that if you can't, you know, go to college, get a job, be quote unquote normal, then you don't really fit in these boxes. And if someone has, mental health abnormalities, doesn't necessarily want to be a part of that society. So then society ostracizes those people, and that's what we end up with so many people who have issues with addiction or homelessness and are unhoused because we don't have a space in society for people who are not conventionally following that path.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to bring a bit of light to. There's too many things like I can't tackle all of that with one film, but it's just part of my personal experience was just watching a sibling who was just not part of that normal track of life, and that there really wasn't anyone who was able to provide guidance on a level that was ever very supportive or helpful. Yeah.
There's such a compassionate lens to the broken in a film like this. And that this is you see in some ways you see the cracks begin or cracks is the wrong word, but you see the foundations being
Mhm.
laid in youth, and you see where you grow into from
Mhm.
there. And I think it's such a stunning way to hold those things in tension as opposed to just taking one vision. I think it's beautiful.
Thank you so much. I think I really wanted to make a film that wasn't villainizing any one character or even like the institution of social services. Just it was a difficult, line to toe because I wanted to make sure that characters were also um, humanized, and part of being humanized is having flaws. But I didn't want to create a caricature in Jeremy or in any of the characters or the parents. It would be very easy to make, for example, the mom into a very hysterical and depressive character. But what I was trying to showcase was a family who has. This is not the beginning of this crisis. This has been ongoing, and this is something that they've been dealing with. And so, in many ways, the parents are already in the middle of it. And I think it was important to show that strength, but also those flaws that come through in experiencing something so difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it doesn't demonize the parents. This is the
Yeah.
other thing. A lot of times we get a story like this. It's like, well, you see, no, these are parents who are just genuinely trying to help.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that's such a wonderful piece. Uh, Sophie, honestly, Blue Heron is just remarkable. And I realize, too, congratulations on your nominations for the Canadian Screen Awards as well
Thank,
as upcoming.
thank you.
Um, this is, and it's well deserved, as I said. Blue Heron is just an incredible film. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us about it. Thank you so much.
Of course, no, thank you so much. It's been an absolute privilege to make the film and even more so to share it. So I really appreciate you helping get the word out.
Absolutely. And I think this is a film that can actually help a lot of people.
Thank you.
So
Thank you so much.
thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks so much.